Welcome to the Millionaire's Lawyer, where you'll hear leading professionals share expert advice on how to grow your business and sell it for maximum profitability. If you want to learn lawyer-proven strategies for building and exiting your business, then this is the podcast for you. Your host, JP McAvoy, is a business lawyer, college professor, and best-selling author who has been assisting clients start, grow, and sell their businesses for millions of dollars for over 15 years. Will yours be the next? Now here's your host, JP McAvoy.
Hello and welcome to the Millionaire's Lawyer. We are thrilled to have you here with us today during a very interesting time, or what continues to be a very interesting time, specifically the COVID-19 pandemic. Getting a lot of notes from people that say they're listening to the show as they're in self-isolation, like to address things that may have some relevance to people in their business lives, but also their personal lives. And so we're doing our best to address some things that will be relevant to that. And I think today's show is another good one. We have Kevin Burciaga on, who's a business person in his own right and a physical therapist and running a physical therapy practice. But he's also got a business that helps people address what might be eating disorders or healthy eating habits relevant to today, as food and mindfulness and mental health are key things that we're all considering as we work ourselves through the pandemic. Kevin taught a method that he describes as the empowerment eating system. He's big on intermittent fasting, as he'll describe in the show, and he's been working with professionals, athletes, students to perfect and improve their own habits to make the best version of themselves on a go forward. I enjoyed our chat with Kevin, and here's a discussion as we got into it today. So great to be here with all of you and with Kevin, who is here today joining us from lovely Modesto, California. Kevin, I guess we spoke a minute offline, talking about how we're in really very interesting times right now, aren't we? Sort of coming through the COVID-19 experience and learning how to be our best version of ourselves. What kind of things are you doing right now in the face of COVID-19, and how do you expect to come out of all this?
Nobody was expecting this. So problems that we don't expect, it's part of life. And when I made my New Year's goals, I wasn't saying, I'm going to overcome this COVID-19 pandemic. But I remember thinking just the other day when things were down and the stock market crashed and we have these lockdowns, it's like, how can I get better? How can I come through this a little bit better than I was before? And what I like to do is take inventory. This is one thing that I like to teach my clients is make a list of all the things that you could improve in your life. And then just start hacking away, kind of like you take a big piece of ice and you're going to turn it into a sculpture. And that's what I'm doing. It's like, how can I be more focused? How can I be more productive? How can I get rid of minimum wage tasks? Now, how can I be more streamlined? That's what I'm thinking. So it's, how can I use this crisis to become a better, healthier, more productive person?
Yeah, it's a great exercise at all times, but certainly now, as a lot of people are at home and have time to reflect, can go through this exercise to be the best version of themselves as they come out the other side of this. Can you tell the audience, I guess you have a number of businesses, the way that you work with clients and what your business focus looks like right now?
Sure. I help people with eating disorders or other eating issues. I serve a lot of young professionals. I even have some students in my program, men and women. And we're using a platform called Zoom, which I think everybody is familiar with now. It seems like everybody is moving into the virtual world. And I work with people one-on-one, but I also have a small group. And so it's just me and a few other people. And it's very interactive. And I actually get better results with the group than I do with the one-on-one, because we can bounce ideas off each other and it's fun, it's interactive, but we always arrive at some truth at the end. And I've got clients in, 2 different continents.
In 2 different continents as well, yeah. So meeting at different time zones as well, right? I guess it is the way of the future. We're seeing now Zoom has arrived, and the way that people are able to connect with one another online is really fostering new ways of doing business, isn't it?
Yes, and in a fast way. It was kind of like a jolt. I think what this pandemic has done is that it took any trend that was in place before and accelerated it 10x. We were already seeing a shift towards virtual services, virtual businesses, tele this, tele that. But now it's like everybody has to do it. There's no choice.
Is that going to inform, I guess, your business on a move forward as well? I guess you were already using it. What other new things are you going to do? As you say that, the 10 times factor, what else is going to impact your business?
I don't see it impacting this business per se too much because we were already doing things virtually. And that's kind of the beauty of a virtual business. But I am also a physical therapist. And a lot of people in my industry, they were working in the outpatient clinic and then boom, they were closed. You got a stay-at-home order. They were considered non-essential. And they have been moving very fast into telehealth and telemedicine. So just in my own profession, we've seen a massive change just in the last 3 or 4 weeks. We had to adapt. And we're doing a lot more telephonic visits.
Well, that's fascinating because, you think for something like physical therapy, literally the word physical is there. Like you would imagine you have to be in person or, able to get your hands on somebody. But I guess that's not the case, right? Can you tell the listeners how, that has evolved as well?
Yeah, just in the last 4 weeks, it is physical therapy, but a lot of physical therapy is consultative. What can the patient do on his own? What does the patient need to do? There are programs and apps where you can send the exercises virtually. These very well filmed exercises, and you can send them and you can send the program. You'd be surprised how much you can do virtually. So you don't have to see the patient one-on-one unless you're doing manual type of work like a chiropractor. Obviously, you can't do that virtually. But the profession has changed more in the last 4 weeks than the last 4 years.
So yeah, as you say, changed more in the last 4 weeks than it has the last 4 years. What does the next 4 years look like then for a business like that?
For a physical therapy business?
Yeah.
I still think you'll have the outpatient clinic. I think some people are still going to want that physical touch. Physical touch is not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. We're going to have to be a little more careful, obviously. But I think what you're going to see is more of a hybrid approach where you have the outpatient clinic combined with virtual visits. So people aren't going to be going there 2 or 3 times a week. It might just be once a week or once every 2 weeks. And you combine that with the virtual visit and email support. That's where I see it going. It's too early to say. We're definitely moving into the virtual space.
It's interesting because moving into virtual, obviously there's some positives to that. There have to be some negatives as well. You'd think that people will start to miss one another. A virtual spacing continues to expand. How do you think people are going to gather in the future? Have you given any thought to that?
I've been thinking about it. It's too early to say. One part of me says the worst part of this will be over in 2 or 3 months and people will revert to the mean. We think that this is going to transform everything. Well, maybe not. I think a lot of people are still going to want to go to restaurants and go to concerts and have that physical touch. And I don't think you can completely eliminate that. Virtual has its place for sure. There's a lot of things you can do virtually, like what we're doing right now. But if somebody really needs that hands-on treatment, there's no choice. They're still going to have to go to the clinic.
Yeah, that's going to continue. I think it's going to continue. It's just people are going to be more thoughtful about how they interact with one another and in large spaces, right? That's just the reality of things moving forward. So business has changed for people listening. I'm sure that they're thinking of how they are evolving their own businesses as well. Clearly, Zoom's one winner through this process. As you said, if people didn't know it before, they certainly do it now, and the stock is taking off. Quite a trader's stock to be looking at and using right now. What other technologies do you employ in your practice and in your businesses?
I like to use Kajabi. Kajabi has evolved quite a bit just since I started getting into the online space 4 or 5 years ago. They have Kajabi pages now. It's all in one. They even have email platform that you can use. You can have landing pages and membership site. I've dabbled with ClickFunnels. I've heard good things about ClickFunnels. Other tools that I use, automated schedulers, apps like Zapier, which kind of integrate everything. So if somebody opts in, you get a notification, or if this happens and that happens. It's the tools that we have now are so much better than what we had just a few years ago. It's easier than ever to start a virtual business like this.
How do you reach people for the most part? Do you find the majority of your clients?
I have a couple of streams. For my organic reach, I use YouTube. I really like making video. Even though it's not a big channel, it's very niched and it's very specific. So the people who watch are qualified people who want that advice. And then I also run Facebook ads, and that Facebook ad goes straight to my calendar, and people can book a call and speak with me.
And that's what happens, I guess, for the most part, is people reach out, and I see that you invite people to have a coaching call with you, and then the relationship evolves from there, right?
Yes, it does. Some people say yes, some people say no. I mean, that's just the nature of sales. If they say no, they can join my email list, or they can subscribe to my YouTube channel so they can continue to stay in my orbit, so to speak. And then maybe later on, they do become a client.
Yeah, in your world. And your YouTube channel is fantastic. You've got a lot of wonderful episodes there. There's a lot of things there that I think are valuable for a business owner or somebody that's very busy and considering how to be, again, at their best, performing at their highest levels. What are some of the things that you teach to business owners that are looking to perform at their highest levels?
I would say learning how to sit still and focus. So whether you have an eating issue or not, the ability to sit down, focus on one thing, avoid the multitasking, learning to control your thoughts, learning to just do one thing and be present. I think that's a really valuable skill in this overstimulated world that we live in, where we have notifications and buzzers and rings, and it's harder than ever to focus. And that's one thing I like to teach my clients is sit still, learn to focus, and just be present in that moment. Enjoy the consciousness. Quit the multitasking, eliminate the distractions.
So I understand the concept as you describe it. How do you teach it? How do you teach people to do that?
One thing I do is I say, when you come home, whether after school or after work, at least before the pandemic, just sit down for 15 minutes and do nothing. It sounds so simple and basic. If you learn to do that and you learn to put that 15 minutes between one part of the day and the other, it can calm you down and it can make you make those better decisions. And they say, what, 15 minutes, just sit still? Yeah, do it. It's harder than you think. It really is.
It'd be really hard because, we're all thinking about each passing moment, right? We all try to maximize what we're doing during each moment, especially busy business people.
Exactly.
So I can appreciate the challenge there. Thinking to some of the episodes that you've got on your YouTube channel. For people listening, can you talk and describe perhaps the intermittent fasting? I know you've got some thinking on this. It's obviously a hot topic these days. What's your thinking on it, and how do you describe it to your clients and people that might be exploring using it for themselves?
My clients always ask me about this. Do you recommend intermittent fasting? And my short answer is yes, absolutely. I don't think it's a cure-all. I certainly don't think it's this miracle practice that's going to transform your life. What I like about intermittent fasting is that, one, it improves focus. So let's just say, typical regimen is only eat between noon and 6 p.m. Okay. That means in the morning, you're not focused on breakfast and what are you going to eat and all these other distractions. You can just focus and do what's most important in the beginning of the day, which is usually when people have the best focus anyway. The other good thing about intermittent fasting, or IF, is that it teaches self-control and self-mastery. So even though you are craving breakfast at, say, 8, 9, you push yourself a little longer, and it improves that self-control, which is what a lot of my clients are looking for.
That's great. And you also do a very nice piece for those that travel. One of the benefits or way of using it as they're traveling. You want to describe that for the listeners as well?
I think if you've never done intermittent fasting, try it the next time you travel, because JP, when you're traveling, your time moves so fast. You get to the security gate, you get on the plane, you land, then there's a layover, then you're rushing to your next plane, then you land again. The day it flies. So if you've never done it and you want to implement it, traveling is the time to do it. The food at the airport isn't that great anyway. You're not going to get airsick. It's the perfect opportunity to try it, especially as the time goes so fast.
Yeah, it's a great time to be doing it. I thought that was a great piece of advice for people that are exploring that or thinking about that for themselves right now. Yeah, you do obviously some of this teaching. You work with students, business owners, people that are obviously that have an eating issue to begin with, but also those that I think are just looking to improve upon what they're doing. What are some basics that you describe in terms of eating habits? What are good eating habits?
So other than intermittent fasting,
yeah.
Some good ones I like to say is make incremental changes. Once you take inventory and you figure out what you want to improve and what needs to change, just make one change every day. I'm also a big fan of unprocessed, lower fat foods. I know the keto diet's really popular these days, but I think when you add cream and butter and cheese to everything, it's really easy to overdo it and go beyond your limits. Another thing, a really good one, a good habit to implement, it's harder to do these days with all the distractions, is to once a day eat in complete silence. Don't look at your phone, don't look at the email, don't be doing something else. It's really easy to be, typing and munching on something, and it's mindless. Sit down once a day, even if it's just 5 minutes, and focus on what you're eating.
And why do you tell people to do that?
Because it forces them to realize that they need less than what they have been eating. And it also teaches them that they really do have control. Another good reason to do that is because you're actually enjoying what you're eating. You're actually registering the taste and the texture. When you're doing something else, your mind is competing and you're not even tasting it. It's like, what's the point? You're just mindlessly eating this snack and you're not even tasting it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. To be more conscious. Now, what kind of foods do you suggest people focus on?
But the less processed, the better. 1, 2, 3, 4 ingredient foods are usually the best. I don't advise the really processed foods for a number of reasons. It's very easy to overeat, very easy to overconsume. They're not designed to satiate you. They're designed to make you consume more and make you designed to go back and buy more. So I like to say a lot of these processed foods that we have today are for entertainment purposes only. Okay, so try to minimize that. Whole unprocessed, lower fat overall, so 20, 25% overall diet. That's a good start. And then you can make small modifications from there.
How are you with red meats? What do you say about red meats, or I guess any meat for that matter?
Personally, I don't eat a lot of meat. That is just based on my own experimentation. I know people who are healthy and they eat red meat. If you are going to eat red meat, make sure it's a quality source, preferably from a local farm, preferably grass-fed, organic. Do your research on it. I don't recommend the red meat from the large industrialized farms. It's worth paying more if you're going to eat it.
All right, right. And things like milk. What do you think about milk?
I get mixed reviews on that. Some people will say milk is a healthy addition. We're designed to eat or consume cow's milk. Other people say it's very inflammatory. Again, experiment with yourself. Get a good source. It's worth paying more for it. Get an organic source if you can. I don't recommend the lower fat versions. I know it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but get at least 2%. It's going to be more filling. The skim milk is almost like drinking white water, if you ask me. But if you don't respond well to cow's milk, there are plenty of plant-based alternatives.
Yes, I'm hearing so much more now about almond milk and all these different types of, as you say, plant-based. Any thoughts on that, or where we're going with all of those?
It's funny because I live in almond country, and so we have the Blue Diamond factory right down the street from here. So they're pumping out that almond milk, and it's every time I go into the freezer section, there's some new plant-based milk. Again, keep it simple. A lot of these milks, they add a lot of sugar. There's a lot of marketing to it. They're not necessarily healthier than the previous version that they have. I always like to tell people, be flexible with your diet, experiment, see what works best for you. But if you don't respond well to dairy, a lot of these milks have calcium, vitamin D, and everything else that you would find in regular milk.
Yeah, it's interesting there. And then we've got all these other things that are now like, how do they describe grown meat, or like the Beyond Meat and the grown meats? What do you think about those? It's
interesting where this is all going. I think some people will choose to eat it. I know they were calling it pink slime for a while. I think it's better than that. The technology is improving, but some people really do miss the texture and the flavor of meat. And the meats that we have now, especially, I think everybody's familiar with the Impossible brand. They've come very close to mimicking that. So I definitely see that as a growth industry, especially as people become more conscious of climate change and resource depletion, but people still want that burger. So yeah, I see tremendous growth in that.
I like to ask questions thinking a year out, 4 years out, as we said earlier. So, what do things look like a year from now with respect to food, or even 4 years from now?
You mean with the food supply, like what are the current trends?
Yes.
Yeah. I think one thing that you're always going to see with food and diet is trends. Things come and go. If you look at what people were doing 10 years ago, they're not doing it now. The big thing now is keto. I still think keto will be a big thing in 3 or 4 years. The lab-grown meat, I think, is ready to take off. We just mentioned that. I think you're going to see a lot more interest in vegan and vegetarian diets. I don't see those going away anytime soon. It's hard to say what new trends are coming. 5, 6 years ago, I had never heard of avocado toast. Now you see avocado toast everywhere. So it's really interesting industry to see these new trends come and go.
Yeah. And that's part of what we try to focus on here is thinking about those trends, where things are going. Talk about food and how the food industry is evolving. Talk about how your business has evolved and the use of technology will be evolving. If we were having this conversation a year from now, Kevin, what would you say, reflecting back on this conversation, has occurred and what has surprised you that has not occurred?
In regards to the pandemic?
No, with regards to business, perhaps your business and business in general.
Oh, with my business, I definitely see myself going into one-to-many. So right now I'm one-to-one, one-to-few, which is a great way to start because it allows you to get that experience with a small audience. And then I would expand into a larger audience. I definitely see myself doing a lot more paid speaking. I think paid speaking is underrated in this age of funnels and automated this and automated that. Being vulnerable, being present, sharing stories, I think that's going to sell. Personal brands, I think that's going to be the future of business. I think content is the new currency. So if you don't have content, you're out of the game. And the best asset to have in the 21st century, at least now, is to have an audience.
Right. Yeah. And content is king, as you say. So being content producers, you're producing it on YouTube and Facebook, right? That's where you're producing your content right now?
That's most of it. Right.
Do you think there's other places where you need to be?
Yes. I've kind of ignored Instagram until now, but a lot of people in my generation and a lot of potential clients are on there.
Mm-hmm.
And I have ideas for that. It's just a matter of execution and urgency. But I see Instagram exploding. I don't know too much about TikTok yet. Right now, it seems to be a much younger crowd, but that is something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, just staying ahead of the curve or staying live to the trends. As you say, Instagram is certainly a place where people are going to. And it's what you're seeing is people just consuming small fractions of information, which is, I think, a challenge. You're obviously a proponent of taking some time, reflecting, and not just responding to whatever little bell or whistle is going off. I don't know if that's going to continue to be the case for the general public, however. I think that's going to be one of the challenges for people that are producing content to get a substantive message heard, right, and understood by people. As we are challenged with that, what do you think the future to that lies?
I've heard that the modern attention span is shorter than a goldfish. Now, I cannot verify that, but it would not surprise me if that were the case. I think in the future with these short attention spans and so much competition, getting people's attention is going to be a really valuable skill. How can you hook people? How can you make the first 5 seconds of your video really engaging? What question can you ask to engage a reader? So capturing attention that in those first 1 or 2 seconds is going to be critical.
That's crazy to think that we need to do it in the first second or two that we are engaging with somebody. Although, as you say, I think that's probably the reality. I think that advertising and the way that people are targeted is going to change as well. When we look at the Facebooks, when we look at the Googles, and so that'll be a game changer as well. And from what we described, there will be this. I think people, as they get bombarded with more and more, there's going to be a real need to actually slow down and unplug, or we're simply going to just get exhausted with the amount of information that is pumped at us on a regular basis. What would be some of the ways that you would advise somebody to disengage? I mean, I know you said before, like, take the 15 minutes and sort of take a moment's pause. But what are some of the strategies in the very busy world that we have today to keep yourself healthy?
What I like to teach my patients and myself is to set boundaries. I use apps that block distractions. So when I'm trying to do something, I can't open certain apps. Those apps are available. They're on phone, they're on laptop. I also like to do things at a specific time every day so that I know, okay, it's this time I do this. And then one thing I've been doing is putting everything on airplane mode in the last hour so that all I can do is read, which is the perfect thing to do before you go to bed. So I'm not listening to music and I'm not bombarding my brain with extra stimuli that I don't need. But setting aside that time and sticking to it, the quiet time, the reading time is really essential. But you've got to commit to it and you've got to pretend like it's a meeting that you have to go to.
Yeah, you've got to be disciplined with it, right? So obviously really important. It's great that you're spending that time reading. What kind of things do you read these days?
I toggle between different genres. I just read a book about relationships. Now I'm reading Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, which has been on my list for years now, and I'm just now getting to it. I have a book coming up on desire and a book coming up on business and on speaking. I try to read a variety of things so that I'm not just focused on one topic. I think that if you want to be eclectic, you've got to read a variety of sources.
A wide range of things. Yeah, great. We'll have to add The Millionaire's Lawyer to your list. The book came out, I think, a month and a half ago, and it's nice to see it trending the way that it is. So add that to your list as well. How do you consume? Do you purchase books? Do you listen to them? How do you consume your books?
I use an e-reader. I've tried audiobooks. The one limitation with audiobooks is that I can't highlight. Mm-hmm. I can't say, oh, it was at time 23 minutes and 17 seconds. It's when you're driving, obviously you can't write that down. So driving, I'm listening to the podcast like Millionaire's Lawyer. But when I read, I like to see the text so that I can annotate it, play with it, write notes, and go back to it later.
Yeah, it clearly informs your own thinking as well. So you're a physical therapist. Is that what you studied in school? What else did you do in school?
Yeah, I went to graduate school for physical therapy, graduated 5 years ago this month.
5 years to this month. And it's interesting, as you say, how everything's evolving through a graduate program. Would there have been discussions about the use of technology for, in a physical therapy practice, or 5 years ago, was that not on the horizon yet?
It was an idea. Even a year ago, it was crawling towards that. And then we had this jolt. It's amazing when people have a sense of urgency, they get things done faster than ever. But I had the idea for a telehealth practice about 3 years ago. It never took off for various reasons. Other clinics were experimenting with it. Now it's a necessity. You have to do it.
So it's a necessary component for any clinic has a telehealth, some form of being able to work with patients remotely. Is that the case?
Yes. And if they don't, they're going to be out of business soon, is my guess.
That's fascinating to think, as you say, and as you call it, a jolt, right? And maybe that's one of the points to take from this podcast is, as you say, there's been a real reason to get there, very quickly in the last few weeks. And a lot of businesses have evolved. I know my own legal practice certainly has. Not that we weren't doing things remotely and, by Zoom as we're talking now, but I'm getting, as you can imagine, a lot of people are asking for wills right now, which is fascinating to think how that is evolving as well. So traditionally a will is one of the documents that absolutely requires pen to paper, where you need as an attorney to be assessing the capacity of the testator. And as they go to state their wishes, to give evidence to their wishes being given, to independent witnesses, watch them sign the document. Now, given the directives for social distancing, it's interesting to see how attorneys are now applying to the courts, and we're expecting a decision in the coming days to determine that a will be valid if it's signed remotely. So we've had some lawyers that have again, to what you described, jolted the system or done this very quickly to bring a case before the courts where they have signed a will with two independent witnesses watching by Zoom. And as the testator signs, holds up to show they signed the page, initialed it, and the affidavit's being sworn immediately thereafter by the attorney and the witness. And that has been submitted to the courts, and we're expecting to hear back from the courts that will be a valid will. It'll be the first time that happens, and again, by necessity. So again, even law in that way is going to be evolving, and we'll continue to watch how that does. People need to think about their businesses and how their businesses are going to be impacted and the new ways or the new reality of doing business given, or as you say, the jolt that we've just received. We have that kind of conversation on a broader scale. There's going to be more and more people that are thinking about this, and we're going to see new technologies, I think, evolve from this as well. And business people will be doing and thinking about this and creating solutions to these problems because that's the reality is we're getting bigger and it's easier to do things multi-jurisdictionally. And so now we're going to need to think about how we're going to make sure everything's actually binding, something that we can use with confidence. And I think that's the same thing with anybody that's giving any type of advice online, right? To make sure that it is something that can be used and used with confidence. When you're working with people, is there follow-up or is there ways to assess the effectiveness of the advice that's being given? How do you go about solving that issue? So something, again, in the physical therapist realm, to see, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would assume that there's an ability working in person with somebody to assess the ongoing improvements in somebody's care. How can you do that virtually? What's the solution for doing that virtually?
You'd be surprised how much information you can get by asking questions. Mm-hmm. They've done research on this. You can get 90% of what you need just with the interview process without even putting your hands on them. And in many cases, you can correctly diagnose them because the patient will say, this hurts, and when I do this, it hurts, and I've tried this. And we're going to have to be a lot more deductive as physical therapists. I know a lot of us like to use palpation. We like to do other hands-on things, and that's fine, but we're really going to have to be good at assessing movement virtually and using the answers that we get to arrive at a diagnosis and at a treatment plan. I think in the future, you're going to see a lot more AI assisting this.
Interesting, yes, AI as well, yeah.
Yeah, that is in its infancy. I've been to a couple of trade shows and I've seen some AI. I think now with more PTs moving online, you're going to see that explode.
That's fascinating. I mean, we've had a few AI discussions in different realms. I discussed, I just mentioned a little bit how a law is being impacted by AI as well. I hadn't thought about how physical therapy would be impacted by AI. Can you describe how that would look? Is it to see movement and have the movement being analyzed? Is that what it is? Or how does that actually work with respect to PT?
That's one way it could work. Another way it could work is you input all of this data and then it gives you several potential diagnoses or prognoses for that matter. So as a diagnostic aid, I see tremendous potential with AI. In fact, and sometimes I feel blind without it. And I think in the future, it's going to be this indispensable tool. But how did you do this without AI? Nothing. Did you just guess?
That's going back to the conversation about how things are going to look different in 4 or 5 years from now, right? I think there's a number of different businesses that people are going to be saying, how did you do this before AI, right? Which is fascinating to think. Yeah, I want to explore. I want to dig in a little bit deeper to describe. So what, with respect to physical therapy, would you be saying in the future, how did we do this before AI? What would be some of those things that we'd be looking back at and saying that about?
I think when you have a patient who could potentially have a systemic issue, for example, does this patient have a joint problem, or is this potentially a cancer for that matter? And I think that's where that's where you really need it. Detecting those cases that need to be referred to a higher level of care immediately. This is not a physical therapy patient. This patient probably needs to get an MRI or see an oncologist because this could be serious. If that's the case, time is a huge factor because you don't want to wait.
Yeah. So how does that work right now then? I don't understand. So just describe for me, Kevin, if you will, the way that this works. Like if we were doing a session right now virtually, take the listeners through what a virtual session would look like. I got to give you some, I guess, right? So like if I'm, what do I have? I mean, I got a torn rotator cuff, I guess. Okay. That's, so I've worked on that, sporadically over the years as well. A partial tear is what I have. So I'm describing, I've obviously got an issue. I've got a throwing injury and I'm describing that to you and trying to get some work done on that.
I would ask you, how long has this been the case? Which movements are hurting the most? I could also do a movement assessment. So you move in different planes, up to the side, rotation. It could also see how many degrees of motion that you have. I could ask you, do you respond well to pain medications? How is this compared to the left shoulder? Is this getting better? Is this getting worse? So on and so forth. And I could be looking for those red flags that indicate to me that this is a tear. He probably needs something surgical.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's interesting because as you described that, a lot of that, is occurring with the in-person meeting. But as you say, the majority is all just verbal in any event. As you're talking with somebody assessing you, you're just describing and having them. And then as you say, you can see some range of motion or things like that would allow, I guess, for some type of rehabilitation plan to be put into place, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, you can send exercises virtually, but the technology to assess movement is improving all the time. And I suspect that you're going to see a lot more improvement in that as we do more things virtually, so that you could be standing there and moving your arm, for example, and the computer or the AI would be collecting all this data to assist with the diagnosis.
Fascinating, yeah. Live in real time and giving some form of assessment as a consequence of that analysis. Brilliant. It's brilliant to think about, again, is the way we sort of began this conversation, how things have changed very quickly in the last 4 weeks. And we're going to be watching, I guess, as they perhaps accelerate in some of these areas into the near and longer term future. For these podcasts, I'd like to have, the experts that are on give something that the listeners can take with them through the rest of their day or the rest of their week. Kevin, you give some really nice thoughts throughout this show today. Can you leave us with something today that would give somebody something to take them through the rest of this day and perhaps this week?
There's no better time to start making changes than now. And I'm a big fan of small change over time. So I don't like the overnight change. I don't like overhauling your entire life in one day. Just be a little bit better today than you were yesterday. Make one better decision than you did yesterday. Over time, that makes a massive difference. Don't think black and white. You don't have to be this one day and then this the next day. It's too much pressure. And it's like you're trying to be perfect in one day. That's not how the brain changes. Nudge the brain. Get the process started, but be patient with that process.
That's great advice. Incremental changes, right? One step at a time, but going in the right direction. That's the key thing, moving in the right direction at all times. That's wonderful stuff. Kevin, thanks so much for being on the show today. Talked about your YouTube channel and your online offering. How could people find you if they were to look out and were interested in learning a little bit more?
They can go to kevinbursiaga.com/empowered eating. They can also find me on YouTube, and my channel is Kevin Bursiaga.
Excellent stuff. We'll have all that in the show notes as well. Kevin, thanks so much for being on today. Thanks for the thoughtful tips. And I look forward to revisiting this at some point in the future to see how much of this has all come to fruition. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Millionaire's Lawyer. Please subscribe and rate on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. To get your business millionaire assessed and to access the wide variety of resources that we offer in addition to this podcast, go to jpmcavoy.com. That's jpmcavoy.com.